have to ask just questions about Creative Spark. You can ask any question. Hector is very smart and talented and has a lot of, hey, welcome to the party. Yeah, I'm calling you out right now. No, I'm joking. So he's going to talk to us for an hour, and then we'll take a small break, and then we'll do track feedback. There is a couple slots left on the track feedback if you'd like to come sign up. And don't forget to talk in the microphone that's up there because we do record these for YouTube, and we are online on Twitch. I'll pay attention to the Twitch channel. If anyone has questions, you can post them in there. And I think that's it. Okay. It's all you, man.
Thanks, Mindy. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming. My name's Hector. I go by Hector J Rodriguez as my artist name. And I started with SoundCloud for street cred purposes, as I told Dave Clayton a little bit ago. I figured I would just kind of play a few tracks so you get a feel for what I do. And then I created a track specific for the class, which was the first new thing I've done in like quite a while. So it was perfect to test kind of the theories that I wanted to talk about getting your creative spark back and like maybe getting started after you haven't been producing or whatever. And so this was the first new thing I've done in quite a few months. I'm excited to share it. So the point was to kind of go through the lecture and then reference the track back for certain parts because they're a highlight of what I'm actually saying in the lecture, because I actually use my own method that I'm trying to show you guys, like just as a proof of concept. So the track is not spectacular. Let me lower your expectations immediately. And so it's good to start there, but it's got a groove to it, and that's what the class really is about. We can get into technical stuff as much as you want, right? But the goal for me coming today was really more about, it's almost less technical and more woo, if you want to call it that, but it's about your connection to your own energy and what your output is with your music based on what rituals you do and how you produce and how you go into making your music. And so please feel free to ask technical questions if you want. I'm happy to answer those. I can talk about EQ curves and compression settings and all that kind of stuff. But the goal here was really to give you something a little bit more tangible that you can use day to day, where you don't have to reference notes or anything. It's just kind of like, I'm going to give you the slide deck that I got, which is a PDF. And so I'm excited to share this with you. But first, do you guys want to listen to some music really quick? Maybe let me know what you think about some of these tracks, because these are all unreleased, what I'm going to play. I'm definitely going to skip through some stuff. It's different styles. It's not all house. I hope you're not all house heads. If you are, though, welcome. But I'll start with some house and then kind of play some slower tunes. I think I'm only going to do 2 or 3 because I know I don't have a ton of time, and I do have a good amount of slides. So let me go ahead and play a couple things really quick. This first one is a release coming up. I think this is going to be my next release, probably coming early February. Well, let me know what you think here. Oh, I may skip around. Don't be mad at me. Nobody wants to hear a 30-second intro. Except for on this one, you're going to hear it. We'll just do like a couple minutes on each one and then skip forward. What do you guys think? Oh, I wasn't looking for claps. I just wanted just regular. Yeah.
Well, we're clapping anyway.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I'm not looking for compliments or anything like that. I just am sharing what I'm doing, so you get an idea of okay, can he mix? Yes. The answer is yes. Does he know how to produce a record? Yes. The answer is yes to that. And so I think it's really hard sometimes when you're not familiar with somebody and what they do, and then they're trying to tell you about how you should use something, and you're like, but wait, I haven't even heard what you do yet, so I'm not really sure if I believe you. But I'll play one more, and then we'll kind of dive into the lesson here. This isn't house. This is way more chill. Thank God.
Woo!
All right. Okay, I think that's street cred. Those two tracks should give me at least an hour's worth of your attention, please.
I immediately wanted to be like, what would this sound like at 174?
I love that.
Yeah.
I love hearing that. All right, let's jump into this because I did eat up a good bit of my time. But first thing, this is all about the Creative Spark. The Creative Spark was kind of this topic that kind of came up while Mindy and I were having sushi, I think, or something. And really, it's either a feeling or a thing or a piece of gear or something that gives you the feeling to take action creatively on whatever it is that's happening, right? It's that moment of like, oh shit. It's like that's almost the best way to describe it. For me, it's very tangible. I live in the moment pretty regularly, and so when I make music, I know when I step into I know when it happens, basically. And the point is to kind of dive into it, to give you guys a bit more background on how it works for me, and to see maybe you guys can compare stories or compare ideas and see if the same thing works for you. Okay, really quick, a little bit about me. I am the label head at Underscore Recordings. We're a local label. We've been active since 2021. Is that right? 2021. Yeah, we do everything house and techno related. We've got our new release coming up late in the next couple weeks, and that's going to be mine, and then one from Jeremy Linden. Mindy used to manage the label. Jeremy Linden is the creative director, and we've got lots of good stuff on there, so go check us out when you get a chance. I'm a producer. I'm an engineer. I went to Full Sail in Winter Park, Florida. I'm one half of Low Key. Low Key is myself and Jeremy Linden, and one half of Repeat Offenders, which is Frank James. He's not very active as much in the scene anymore, but we used to do stuff together, and we put a few records out. As far as events that I'm responsible for, or partly responsible for at least, my team, Back of the House. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's basically happening here tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yep.
Shameless plug.
Yep, shameless, very shameless. No shame. Drip FM, That's a coffee shop, smaller event on the last Saturdays. We play lots of records. It's open format for the first couple hours. It's really fun and it's very low key, low committal, or non committal, I should say. And there's mimosas. So there's that. Steam is probably a quarterly at this point, and that's a party where we get to pick people from the audience, our DJ friends, and they come up and they play with us. And it's a whole lot of fun. Like there's just impromptu moments. And then Trust Your DJ, we haven't done in a long time, and the wind up we haven't done in a long time. But again, I wanted to just kind of show my background here. So that's enough about me, I think. So our discussion topics for today are understanding what the creative spark is, finding joy in your process. Joy is really important when it comes to making music, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. And that doesn't mean you need to be happy. It just means there's a mindset while you're making music. You could be making the saddest song ever and be still having a good time making the song and still be sad. But there's a part of it where you're connected, and that doesn't feel like sadness and depression, even if you're working on a really fucking sad song. Does that make sense to everybody? The context is there, but your connection to the music is really important. And I'll probably dig into some more of that woo stuff later. Playfulness leads to productivity. Achieving flow state, I think that's really important when it comes to making music. Breaking the rules on purpose. I do this all the time now as I've gotten older, kind of in my career. Overthink and overproduction, I think two very, very, very important things. I have a special connection to both of those items, and so we'll talk about those kind of towards the end, and I'll kind of show you by example, actually, what those things look like. All right, so what the hell is creative spark? I tried to define a little bit ago. I didn't do such a great job, but basically it's the moment or feeling of inspiration that leads to motivated action, and it often ignites what feels like, or what should feel like, effortless creativity, or leading into a creative flow state where it's kind of like, you guys, how many of you guys are DJs? Nice, everybody, cool. I should have known that. That was a stupid question. Right, so for all of us then, raise your hand if you've ever played a show and you were doing the thing that we do where you're going, let me preface this by saying I typically don't play pre-planned sets anymore, right? And as you go along in your career, you might find that you enjoy that too. And so this is coming from that premise. Or maybe you're at a house party or something, you weren't really expecting to play, all of a sudden you're up on the decks. So have you ever played a gig where you could not pick a wrong track? Raise your hand if you've had that experience. That experience to me is one of the most blissful things it's up there with, like, I'm going to try to keep it PG, but it's up there. There is nothing like not being able to, or what feels like, it's like, oh, I can't really go wrong, right? And so everything led up to this point, and you're playing some tracks with some people, and they're having a good time, and then you keep picking one, and it just keeps getting better and better and better. And even if you kind of mess it up a little bit, you recover quickly, you don't dwell on it, and you just keep going. You know that feeling that you get when you get off the decks? Or that feeling when it first starts and you realize, holy shit, like I can't go wrong, and you're in a groove, and then all of a sudden 45 minutes has passed by super fast, and it's time for you to get off because we only get an hour to play everywhere, right? That is the feeling I'm talking about. That idea that you can naturally select the right things at the right time to either play or to insert in your arrangement or whatever, and it comes naturally and effortlessly, and it doesn't take a struggle against the DAW, a struggle against your samples, a struggle against your own emotional state. Does that all make sense? So to me, why it matters is because it's the driving force for me it's the driving force for my most authentic and original work. And I say that just because the things that happen in that state are, sometimes I can't really explain how I got there, right? Like I just pressed a bunch of buttons and there's some stuff happened and I was like, oh shit, that's cool. And then all of a sudden you have this awesome bass line that, go ahead and try to recreate it if you want. You know what I mean? It's like that kind of feeling. I look for those moments. I look forward to those moments when I make music. And making music from that place is a whole lot more fun than when you sit down and you don't really know where you're going or what you're doing or what your point is, or maybe you're trying to make something for a specific label, but you're just not in that kind of mood today or whatever. I'm not sure where you guys are in your production journey, but I've definitely had times where I meant to make tech house and I made deep house, and it was not it. And so then now there's this time that you put into it, and you're not sure whether you really got something out of that time, right? Well, the truth is you did. There was something that happened in that session, and you'll take that with you for the next one. And sometimes tracks aren't meant to be put out. Sometimes they're meant to help you learn for this next thing that you're gonna do. And then that's the one you're supposed to put out. You never really know. My point here is the approach when you go to make the music often dictates the output, for me personally. And again, a lot of this is like my own personal experience. So some of you guys might be a fucking machine and can sit down on any day of the week and bang out whatever it is you want. That's like amazing. I can mostly do that, but like not, I really like to be in the mood to make the thing I'm making, if that makes sense. So common barriers to this: creative blocks, overthinking, perfectionism. Overthinking is a big one. Perfectionism really is a big one. And then fear of judgment by peers. I'll say it here just because a lot of us don't talk about it, but how many of you guys are thinking about what such and such is going to think when they hear this, when you make music? Right? You're thinking about like, oh, when I send it to their, like what are they going to say? Like, does that have any place in the creative moment when you're trying to express yourself creatively? Maybe not. So it really is kind of controlling your mental state while you work, right? And trying to peel away the barriers that keep you from authentically expressing. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. You guys aren't bored, right? If you're bored, better get a drink if you're getting sleepy. No, I'm just kidding. So there'll be some key takeaways mostly on each slide. So the key takeaway here is focused creativity isn't just an inherent skill. It's a mindset and it's a practice. And I say that because everyone in here is gifted in some way. Every single one of us has some gift. It might be pottery, right? Like it might be you make the dopest bird feeders anyone has ever seen, right? But that's your gift. Okay, cool. But my point here is that while I think I have a gift, I've had to develop that gift, and that development is the practice. That's not just something that was given that I can use. It's more like, it's kind of like somebody gave you a rope and you made a whole ship out of it or whatever, right? That was the stupidest analogy I've ever said. But you get what I'm trying to say. It's like you started with a little and then you developed it into something else. That wasn't inherently there, even though you're good at picking tracks or whatever. You guys all get my point, right? Any questions here? All right, so some of the sources, what I would like to say is a creative spark source. I listen to a lot of different music. As you heard, I make a lot of different music. I do love house and techno, I really do. But that is not all I love, right? And what I find is that all of my music gets better the more I diversify and try to make different types of things that aren't, like I want to make drum and bass now, not just because it was on, that was, it just happens to be on an upswing. I want to make drum and bass because every time Mindy plays it, I'm just like, yeah, like from wherever I'm at in the room, right? And so I've had experience with drum and bass, but I'm just getting more interested in it. And so to me, that means I got to go make it. Because whenever I make it is when I really understand the genre, right? Which is why I make everything. It helps you to expand your skill set in every way. Even if the track doesn't come out, you can make techno and it could be like very mids. Techno is very mids. But you learn something, right? So you can take that with you to your next thing. Let's see. I keep a playlist of things to sample. Raise your hand if you keep a playlist on Spotify or whatever. If you use Spotify, don't raise your hand. I don't want to be friends with you. I'm kidding. That was a joke. That was a joke, but you should fucking stop it. I switched the title, and I don't know. I heard it's a little better or whatever, but I'm doing the best I can. But I keep a list of songs to sample, I keep a list of reference tracks. Like, for example, if I want to go make some deep house that's really melodic and everything, and I don't make that like all the time, I can go into my playlist and find that genre and at least 3 or 4 tracks that will give me an example of what that should sound like, right? So as you continue to produce, continue to build up your library of reference. Because when you're thinking, how should that bass sound? That's the fastest way, is to go, let me just go check out over here. How'd they do it? Oh, okay, yeah, no, mine sounds like needs work, right? And then you come back and you kind of make some changes. I like to blend separate styles to create something new. After like 20 years of producing, creating something new becomes an entirely different endeavor. I really do want to say that. The thinking gets different. It starts to be more about blurring lines as opposed to technically being, 100% correct. I like to sample a lot of older records, digital or vinyl. I prefer vinyl. Vinyl has a sound. I'm not gonna do the thing. We don't need to do that. All right, digital's cool. I play MP3s. It's not a problem, right? But I do like the feeling of vinyl, and I have emulators and I have tape emulators and all that other stuff, and it does all add a vibe to what you do. But there was a way that people made music in the past, so it's not just the crackles and the warmth and all that other jazz that most people like to talk about. I think for me, the older music, for example, the record that the track that I made for this class has 2 samples from 2 older records. I want to say they're mid-90s. There's a certain sound that comes from that. And that sound has to do with technology often, right? And so back in the day, the machines that they used to sample those records weren't super high quality, right? And so the drums themselves have a certain oomph to them and a certain sound to them, right? That has everything to do with conversion, has to do with what kind of converters were used in that Akai machine. I say Akai because those are the most famous ones. You think about hip-hop drums, the drums that you just heard on that second track I played, those all came from a 2000 XL. That's the sound of hip-hop between like 92 and 2005, right? Anybody hip-hop heads around here? Word, I know you do, yeah. So that gear has certain qualities, right? I like to go back and sample what was made on those machines because they knock. You'll hear it. Love drum machines. I love analog gear with good knobs. I find this interesting. It's actually weird to say now that I'm up here in front of you all, but emotions and the need for self-expression drive my creative output. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but like when I'm upset or when I'm feeling deeply about whatever, the fastest way for me to get it out of me and into wherever it needs to go is to put it in a song. Even if there's no lyrics, no words, I just made a track that embodies that feeling, right? So I use it in a way as therapy, which probably explains why I have something like 500 private SoundCloud tracks. And like 72 albums that nobody has heard. Because this is what I do, right? And it's really something when you can release an emotion and put it into a piece of music and then come back to that. And if you want to feel that emotion, you can go back and feel it again. But not right now. You don't have to. You don't have to walk around with it because you already put it in the song. Does that make sense? I'm not a psychologist. I do charge $75 an hour, though, for therapy. I'm just kidding. So a big part for me in producing music is finding joy in the process of making music, right? And so even if you're in a bad mood, it's finding the thing that makes you want to keep doing it. And so for me, I focus on more of the act of creating as opposed to what's coming out. I've done it, and repetition is everything, right? So I've done enough repetitions where I have a better sense of how to guide the song if I want a particular output, if I want something specific to come out, if I'm, aiming for a deep house label and I'm putting a release together or whatever. Yes, I can go and do that. But I really enjoy when I'm surprised by what comes out because I allow myself to just kind of run free with what I'm doing, right? As opposed to being like, oh no, I need wubs because I'm doing this kind of bass line or whatever. It's kind of like, well, what if you just let the thing that's going to happen, right? That's kind of what I'm referring to here. So emotional connection, let your emotions guide your work rather than pressure to meet expectations, rather than trying to make the next tech house banger. Go ahead and try to make some deep house and see what happens. Maybe you'll end up making tech house on accident, right? It's kind of like happy accidents are good. Embrace them, right? And not everything is always an accident. Sometimes you pull up a patch and it's wrong until you tweak something, and then it's really right. So just a matter of being patient with the process. The key tip: take breaks to reset frustration when frustration builds, and then stop yourself and remember why you're doing what you're doing, right? If you're doing what you're doing to impress your friends, you should stop it. And I say that because obviously I've done this to impress, not to impress my friends, but to, you want to show that you're capable and that you have these skills and you have all these things. And my main point here is the music that you make is better when you're authentic in what you're making, right? It is naturally better. And I have made enough, and I have tried to be enough things, and I've experimented enough to kind of like really get that. My mic control is terrible. I'm sorry, y'all. So set the stage for creativity. There's one thing. Focus on the act of creating, not just the outcome. Your physical environment. How many of you guys produce in a room that's not clean? Raise your hand. That's really good. Okay, we got a couple of stragglers. Okay, that changed the entire situation. So I say that because, and cleanliness that's obviously, is it subjective? Is that the right way to say that? Right? Like my state of clean might not be your state of clean because I'm an ex-Marine, right? And so my clean is different than most other people's. With that said, I find that I work better when my work area is not a mess, right? And so often I won't sit down to work if it is a mess. I'll need to like stop and kind of clean up first, right? Just the simple act of cleaning up will change the way you feel and therefore will change the output. Something so simple, right? Clean up your fucking desk. You know what I'm saying? Wipe off the soda. Let me stop. Okay, let's see. You got a question, Dave? What's up?
So, yes, this act of cleaning, like you could consider that like a ritual. Are there other like rituals you do to kind of get yourself in the mood?
Absolutely. There was another slide where I was going to get more into that, but as far as I was going to actually, I was going to encourage that. For me, it depends on what I'm working on and what the goal is, right? Is there a goal? If there is a goal, for example, let's just use the last thing I did. So the track that I made for you guys, I really was trying to make something very classic and very housey, right? And to me, those two words, when it comes to like, I call it proper house music, just a very housey sound often has a vocal or a soul sample, right? That's the vibe I was going for. So if I'm going for that vibe, I'm going to start listening to that kind of music before I work, right? Like maybe in the morning or maybe the night before. I might want to go find a few reference tracks or a track to make me excited, right? Something that I hear that's either new or old or whatever. In this instance, and this is a part of what I meant by, what are your sources for your creative spark? One of my sources are vinyl records, like I mentioned, right? And so for the record that I made for this session, there's two samples off of a record. I think it's like maybe a half a bar. It repeats really quickly. But that in itself made me go crazy. Like I basically turned it on and pressed play, and I was like, oh, those drums are so dope, right? And I sat there and I looped it, and I sat with that for like an hour. I realized how crazy that sounds, and that's going to happen again throughout this presentation. I am a little crazy for this stuff, but the drums sounded so good I didn't want to do anything else to it. I had to like kind of force like, okay, you got to put something on it, right? And so what's interesting about ritual is one of them for me is sometimes I listen to records. And often I've gotten to the point now where I just hook up Ableton and turn on record because I'm going to find a sample. Like I'm going to have a moment where I go, oh, fuck yeah. And I'm immediately going to cut that. And once I loop it, I'm off and running. I don't know if I'm just like a different person than most people, but I mean, I can find inspiration in like a toilet. Like there's I have a toilet brush and it makes, Mindy, I showed you the toilet brush, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? I got this toilet brush. Just hear me out. It's ceramic and it's got a metal top, right? And it has a very thin like plate. When you, just hear me out. When you put the toilet brush in the thing, it goes shing, and it makes this fucking sound, and it is a glorious toilet bowl cleaner sound, right? And I put it in a fucking track because it sounds really cool, and so I recorded it. It's not even like a main thing. It's just like it's almost like a transition sound. Like you would use it probably 3 times in a song, and I would probably pitch it 3 different ways, right? But that led to me creating a track, and thus the creative spark, that thing that makes you take action, right? That's exactly what we're talking. I'm really glad that I did show you that, because I would have been out here on an island if you didn't support me on that.
But I agree with you on the ever since I started producing music, especially like the weirdest things.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that sounds really cool. And then I go and record it with my phone because I'm like, oh, that sounds really good. It's simple, but your brain, yes,
Yeah.
I did assess your toilet bowl thing. Yeah.
It's kind of there's a part of it that almost feels like, oh, like this is stupid, you know, like why would I record this or whatever? But keep going and let it be stupid for 30 minutes, right? Like don't give it more than 30 minutes, but give it 30 minutes and see how it comes out. There is really something to recording your own sounds and making a track and having what you recorded be a part of the track, like in your face. That shit feels good. Do it if you haven't. Also, voice memo on an iPhone. I don't know if you guys got iPhones or whatever. The software is actually really good, believe it or not. I don't know if there's any professionals on the stream. Judge me. All right, whatever. The software is good enough that I take samples from the street and use them in my tracks. Like, I use it all the time. Go ahead.
I was actually getting ready to. So when the protests, the Black Lives Matters protests, were all going on up on the hill, I took my field recorder down with me and recorded all sorts of things: chants, helicopters, sirens, like all these different things. And then I made that hip hop track with Angela Davis's voice in it, and I use all field recordings for all of the like extra stuff in there, and it was so much fun. And it was authentic because it was like I went and I recorded all those sounds in an actual protest, so that felt really cool.
Yeah, it gives you a different feeling about what you created, but don't let that, that's great and everything, but what you create is valid, period, because you created it. It doesn't matter if you used 40,000 samples. It doesn't matter if you didn't put in one single MIDI note. Like, let's all take this moment to get over people's opinions and stuff about how you should be making your music and where you should be getting the tools from. The only thing that matters is it dope when you finish it? Like, that's it. Or even aside from that, how do you feel? Does it make you happy? Or like, is it bothering you? Like, stop listening to it and make another one, right? It's this idea that you can do all the things you want to do as long as you allow yourself the freedom to not be kind of squeezed by what your peers expect or by what's happening in the scene or by, like drum and bass is hot, so now I got to make drum and bass. Yeah, but you make good R&B. Like, why don't you just keep making R&B? But also, don't be afraid to try new things. So be curious, try new genres, unorthodox workflows or unconventional instruments. Experimentation without judgment sparked creativity. I think I covered that, and that was amazing. I didn't even look at the slide. Tools for playfulness. Use randomizers, experiment with out-of-tune samples, or create arbitrary challenges. The arbitrary challenges one, that's something that I use all the time. lately I've been trying to be like, well, how do I do this with only, like, I try to pretend like I'm on a tape machine with only 8 tracks. And so the end of whatever I finish has to fit down into 8 tracks. And so, like, limiting yourself can sometimes be really helpful in pulling out new creative ways to use the tools, right? A practical example here is, like I just said, create and use your own samples, use different samples in place of the usual kick and snare. You ever try replacing your snare with, like, a toilet? I mean, since we're on the toilet, right? No, I'm just kidding. But, you know, some other percussive, impactful sound, right? Do you guys remember Flume? Yeah. Right? Okay, he is that dude when it comes to that, right? That first record that he put out, his first big one, his first release, he was using battery, right? And in battery, you can tell it to play a different sound on the 2 and the 4. And so he would use like 3 or 4 different sounds, or it would be the same snare affected in a different way, etc. And that was the Flume sound. Like, you were expecting a crack from a snare and you got like a lizard or something. It was like, you know, like you got some weird shit, but it was cool, right? And that he had like the wherewithal to be like, no, I'm gonna try it. And then after he did that, what happened? Everybody started doing it, right? After Skrillex put 7 limiters on a bass line, everybody started putting 7 limiters on it. That was arbitrary. 7. It was an arbitrary number. Question?
Yeah, like actually when I started producing, I had like Ableton Live Lite, and Ableton Live Lite at the time, I think it's different now. I think they give you more, but bro, like back in the day, I only had like 8 or 6 layers to work with.
Yeah.
And like now, my brain now, I could not right now, but when I was just learning how to do it, it kind of showed me how not to do too much. And I still did too much, but the fact that I could do that was so little, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, it makes a difference. Being limited makes you automatically be more creative. And we'll get to the overcooking part and the overdoing of it.
And I think you could also try to recreate a sound too, like a reference or something, and you're like, "Ooh, I really want to try to recreate the sound that has already been," just to like test your limits to see if you can do it. You know?
Yeah. That's another way. That's for me. That kind of inspiration comes in other songs I've heard, where I just hear a part and I'm like, "Damn, how the hell did he do that?" And then I got to kind of like go backwards and like or go re-engineer it or whatever. I really enjoy that because it flexes your muscle, and it helps you to be able to do it on your system with your own tools. Any questions on that last slide? So part of my goal, and I'm like mostly halfway through and almost forgot, but part of my goal was to go back to the music and show you some of these areas, right? I'll try to just run through that quickly after we get through the slides. Let me try to hurry up. Breaking the rules on purpose. So for me, rules are guidelines and not absolutes. Actually, nothing is absolute for me most of the time. I find a lot of freedom in bending or breaking the rules, right? In talking practical application, on the track that I created, which I'm going to play here shortly, the kick has a hi-hat on it. Yes, I did that, and I kept it. Because why not? I can filter it later. I can mess around with it later. I can get it to what I want to be, right? And the kick is actually a combination of 2 different samples, which have way more than a kick going on, right? Engineers will tell you that, well, that's not right, because you want separation on every track. You want to be able to process things separately. So that's what I mean by breaking the rules, right? I should go back and just play it, but you'll hear when I play, and it's very specific. It's a specific sound. It's not necessarily right as far as technically speaking, but it feels right.
And I think that track that you played us at the first track that you played us had a similar thing. I actually wrote down the kick is crunchy because it has like some high notes that are kicking it with it, but it adds a really cool uniqueness to it.
Yeah, I do it all the time now. We can play it again, but so the track I'm talking about is not the one I played. I haven't played it yet. You'll hear it though, and I kind of, this is interesting because I want to see you guys' faces when you go, oh yeah, that's what you're talking about. That shit sounds fucking weird, right? Like I'm excited to see you guys' faces, but actually let's just go ahead and listen to it. So again, this was like kind of a housey number. it wasn't supposed to be, and I didn't put a ton of time into this, but what happened with it was a true like proof of what I'm trying to be up here explaining, right? And so I had these two vinyl samples, and like that shouldn't have been a thing, but they turned out to be like the kick and part of the bass line, right? And the bass line isn't really a bass line, it's a combination of three different instruments all doing separate things, and it does a thing. And so let's listen to it really quick. It's not that one. That's a old Sting sampled track that I made a long time ago. I guess that's been going. Or Phil Collins, yeah. My bad. I smoke a lot of pot. I'm also kind of old. Like, I'm just kidding. Okay, here we go. So that is mostly two samples from two separate vinyl records. I was excited about that sound. Fast forward to the break really quick so you can hear the drop. So you get the feel for what was happening there. The reason why this is significant to me is because everything that we discussed in the slides happened on this track. So I broke the rules by using a kick. That's not really just a kick. It's got a kick and a hi-hat. And I actually imported these without the plugins because, all right, here's my disclaimer. I just got a new Mac Mini, and this is obviously a laptop, so they don't match. So I can't jump into all the plugins with you because my Mac Mini is not all the way set up. So some of the stuff I use, they just don't match between that computer and this one. That's why we're not digging into the plugins. Also, that would add like an hour of time to the entire lecture. So the point here was to kind of go through and listen to some of those parts and whatever that mistake was or whatever that weird thing was, right? And so I'm going to kind of just deviate from the slides, partly because I'm running out of time and partly just to make the examples, right? So the kick, that's the bus, so that's both samples.
You started at 10 after, by the way, so you do have till 10 after.
Oh, cool. Okay, thank you for that. And then that's the one with the hat. It is EQ'd, right? But that hat still adds, it's there. It adds to what's happening in the track. that's the sample. So that's actually an entire another drum loop. And it's got a kick and a snare and like another hi-hat thing. And that shit is so dope that I just wanted to use that like on its own. And I had to be like, I gotta put something on it. Right? Because I had it right now. What's really interesting, and I wish I could show you the plugin, I can't, I'm sorry. It's not because I'm trying to keep it from you. It's a freaking B3 or it's just an organ, right? But it's a rotary. And it's got 2 chambers, right? And typically you use it for keys, you use it for organ type sounds. Well, I ran the sample through it. And this one is really interesting, and I'll dive into a little more. What's really cool about it is that it's a UAD product, so it's got 2 chambers, right? And it's got a horn on the top that spins, right? And that's how they get either fast or slow, that very pumping kind of organ sound. So I ran that drum loop through that organ thing as an effect. And you can place the microphones in different places on the plugin, right? So it's just a sample, but I'm running it through some really weird, I'm just kind of messing around with, how can I affect the sound? So the effect it gave me was I was able to get rid of some of the bass in it, which was good, even before EQing, right? Because I set the mic off to the side instead of having it in the front of it. And then it gave a very hollow feeling to the top end, which that's not the right sample. This one. But that top end cuts through the rest of the mix, right? Even though there is a snare in there, there's hi-hats, there's shakers, there's all that stuff, but you can still hear the crack of that sample, right? That's because I affected it in that way. If I hadn't affected it in that way, it just would have been a whole real muddy mess. And I think it is still kind of muddy. The bass is a little heavy. But I haven't fully done the treatment on this. Any questions so far? What's up?
Can I make a down-tempo edit out of this? Because my brain was like thinking of this in 100 for some reason.
Yeah, so this session is blank. This session just has the stems. Cool. And I wanted to give you guys the material anyway, so I'll drop a link to all this stuff in the folder before we leave so I don't forget like last time.
Hell yeah.
Don't judge me. I'll be busy. But you'll have the session, you'll have the stems, you'll have the lecture, and I'll see what other stuff I can throw in there. But another key point in this, right, is kind of like where you're starting from and where you're getting to. And so, I knew that was going to happen. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I'm glad I got a mini. No, we're okay. It's only on the side. I'm good. I'm good. I've done this.
Take the shirt off my back.
I've done this once or twice. I'm glad I wore my damn scarf today. Fuck. So for those of you online that can't see, I totally spilled a drink on my laptop.
You got Apple Care?
Not on this one. I'm just gonna have to put it in the dryer. It'll be fun. It'll be okay. No, that's all right, man. You can still remix it. Don't worry about it. So the melody for this track started with a very simple, like, key sample, which I think is this one, right? And nope, not that one. There's 2 pieces there, right? There's a sample, and then there's that very clicky kind of organ sound. Okay, so as far as technique goes, we all know that you can right-click a sample and get the MIDI out of it, right? Okay, I do it all the time, right? And the great part about it is that you can grab a bass line from that, you can create a stack from that, you can create all kinds of stuff from the one sample by just modifying the notes, right? And so that's exactly what happened here. And so we talk about, thank you. I'm good, I got it. Yep. We talk about the creative spark part, like, okay, where did you start and where did you end? And so the entire melody of this track was basically created from one key sample, right? And then I just kept going with it. I kept breaking it down further. I kept muting out certain notes. And then I ended up with that thing going on when it was just the one chord, right? Here's the vocal sample. It was just one vocal sample. It's like a dude being like, "We won't be," right? And I duplicated that 3 times. I affected the 3 different tracks in 3 different ways. I panned them separately. One of them is mono, the other 2 is stereo, so that the stereo field is full with the sample, right? Each one of those tracks is affected differently. There's a different amount of delay. There's a different amount of reverb. There's a different amount of saturation, right? And the one that's in the middle is the mono sample, which is that main vocal, so to speak. But they're all compressed together as a group, right? And so they stay in the pocket. And I didn't want them up front. I kind of wanted them to be in the background, pushed back. So that's reverb, a little bit more compression so it doesn't stick out too bad. I really wish I had a pop filter. I'm not a rapper. And then I put in some effects and some stuff. There was some steam in there. I typically shy away from using steam, but it kind of worked out in this one. And so the overall effect is a groove that stays together and kind of chugs along, right? But if you remember from when we listened to this, there's different things taking place. There's different things turning on and turning off, right? But they're all kind of within the same key. They're all following a structure with each other. And all this stuff came from basically the same, like 1 or 2 samples, right? So you can go really far with limiting to like, okay, what can I do to complement that? A lot of it was editing of MIDI notes, and then also not just the notes, but the way the notes are played, the length of the notes, especially when it comes to things with mid and low end. What I did was I had to stretch some of the notes, and then I had to cut some of them short, right? I especially like to use a bunch of different things to attenuate sound, not just volume. And so the fullness of a sound can be changed, the amount of decay, right? So for some of the key parts, when the track isn't super busy, the not the attack, but the velocity of that note is way down, right? And it gives you the same note, but it gives you a different feeling because most of our plugins are velocity sensitive at this point, right? And so what you get is a lot of dynamics with the same exact part, with the same exact notes and the same content. And as a person who isn't necessarily the best keyboard player on the planet, not even close, I don't think I'm on the list, right? But I wish I was a better musician, but I can certainly make it sound like I am. And it is all about how you execute, right? Any questions about any of that stuff? I know I just threw a lot at you and went off script a little bit here, but no? All right. Let's see if we can get through this lecture really quick. All right. Achieving flow state. This one is important. We all know what a flow state is. We kind of talked about it before, DJing, can't pick a wrong track, etc. Dave, you asked about ritual, and this is my ritual slide. So I prepare my space and my tools. When we talk about space, we kind of discussed it, like cleaning up and whatever. Sometimes I'll light incense. Sometimes I'll change the lights. Mindy knows that sometimes the vibe, and like we just got to get in the vibe, right? So sometimes I make the light this color, and then I feel like I'm in the club, and all of a sudden I got to listen to things louder, and there's a vibe, right? And it's happening right now, and I'm standing up now. I'm not sitting down for whatever reason, right? And so this is all the right before you jump into that state. As far as tools go, I don't like to have to figure something out technically when I'm trying to create. It is the biggest buzzkill. It's like you just took a shot and somebody called the cops, and now you got cops to deal with, right? And now you have a buzz. It's kind of like, I don't know. The timing doesn't match, right? So what I like to do is on days that I'm not producing, if I'm going to spend some time working on something, I'm going to spend some time working on my tools, right? And so I might create samples. I might create loops out of existing loops. So sometimes I like to take a stack of 3 things and just start editing things out and then super loop that. So basically I combine that. I record it down to 1 track, and now I've got my own loop that nobody has ever heard, and I can use that as a sample in one of my songs, right? Nothing wrong with that.
Making sure your plugins are updated.
Yeah. So there's that.
Nothing is more frustrating than opening the plugin and then it's update and you're like, oh, fuck.
So I haven't been as consistent, I want to say, in the last year, but I remember a time when I did like every 6 months, I did like an overhaul, and I would go and change out plugins. I would like remove things that I didn't use. I would go explore plugins that I'm not necessarily using regularly, because I guarantee you got like 20 plugins in your shit right now that you haven't touched and that you don't even know. You're like, what's that? And then when you go and you mess with it, you figure out that shit's been sitting there for those last 3 tracks that, I really could have used that on the last one, right? And it's this really interesting thing of, it's kind of like knowing your tracks as a DJ. How much easier is it to DJ when you actually know what's happening in those tracks, right? Don't get me wrong. I am an absolute one of those people who buys 50 tracks a day that they go to do a gig and rocks them. Like it's just an experience thing, right? But knowing your tracks does allow you to play them better. And so knowing your tools allows you to produce better. It sounds really simple, but it is kind of silly. I challenge you today to go through your list and see how many of them you really know. I'm not doing that because I'm weird and I have a lot of stuff and I love it, right? And at any given time I can, and that's what I did kind of for this track, is I went and used a whole different set of tools because I wanted that classic house sound, but I didn't want to make it complicated. So I let go of any kind of judgment. In working with other people, do you guys produce music the same way you would when you were at home by yourself? When you're working with other people? So when you work, when you collaborate, or you've got somebody over and you're working or whatever. I don't know if you guys collaborate, but I work with a good amount of different people. And what I find now is that the way I produce music is the way I produce music no matter who the fuck is around. And it is a glorious place to be. I'm not up here saying like I'm the man. I think what I'm saying is I've accepted what I do and how I do it, right? And there's a confidence in that. And so I don't switch up for anybody who's around for the most part, with the exception of just maybe, partaking in drinking or smoking a little more than I normally would, right? Because it is kind of like sometimes a party atmosphere when you're making house music with your friends. But for the most part, you need to let go of whatever that thing is that's keeping you from being authentically yourself while you're producing, right? If that includes other people, if that includes your girlfriend, it's something to look at. I save deep edits for later. When I'm creating. I normally work in a super loop fashion. Everybody knows what that is? Any questions on that? No? Okay. A super loop is when you're working in Ableton, and instead of working in what I call the arrangement view, I'm an old Pro Tools head, so sorry. But to me, this is where I arrange, right? I actually create the song left to right. And then here is non-linear, so you can work with loops and you can work with parts, right? And so what I call a super loop is like I'm adding things in this view, and it's just looping. There's no structure to it unless I mute. And typically, my arrangement is mentally half done by the time I get to the point where I want to arrange the song. Most of it is like, it's getting there. Mindy has seen it. It happens fast. I think, what's the record? Like 15 minutes, something like that. Even less or some shit. I don't know. Say that one more time.
Do you feel like you're playing the MIDI clips like in more instruments when you're in this view as opposed to arrangement, or am I just making that up?
Yeah, it is kind of like that. To me, this is a very creative view because it just keeps going. And there isn't a structure. I have to create it by muting, by turning things on and off, right? Right. Right. I will say that the meat of the track comes from here, right? But the sauce of the track comes from your edits after you've arranged. So arrangement to me just means here's a build-up, here's a drop, here's a little part where some other shit should happen, here's a little part where some other stuff should happen, right? To me, that's the arrangement part. I can do that, right? And I've arranged a song with all the parts, okay, cool, but it doesn't have the sauce. It doesn't have the spice on it, on top. That, I like to say, I make my money editing, right? And what I mean by that is, if you've got a part that loops every 8 bars, right? And you don't go in there on the transitions and modify some of those parts so that different things can be heard as you approach the transition. Doesn't the track sound loopy? Like, doesn't it make it so that it's like, oh, there's no distinction between one phrase or the other, right? So as a DJ, and I do think about DJs sometimes when I'm producing, especially with house music, right? And so as a DJ, I like to make sure that you know when a phrase is up. There's a sound that tickles, right? And all good producers do that. They make it easy for DJs to play their tracks, right? Don't put a vocal in the first, like in the beginning, like don't do that, right? Because other people are trying to mix out of their track and they're not ready for that vocal yet. It's like little things like that you learn as you kind of progress. I lost my train of thought. Where was I? Hold on. Oh, did that answer your question? Okay, cool. You probably already knew what it was, right?
Yeah,
You did. Oops, sorry. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Oh, pitfalls. This is important. I think I'm coming up on time, but I think we kind of got through it. So these are really, I think this is the last line. Let me see. Yep. Okay. These things are important. I really wanted to make sure I get through these. So all jokes aside, I do think I'm an amateur comedian, so thank you for laughing at my jokes. I cannot show you a better example of somebody who overthinks than what you're looking at right now. Mindy is being really cool about it, but if you talk to her with me not around, she'll tell you the depths of what's happening, right? I have an entire catalog of music that I haven't released due to overthinking and trying to strategize and trying to put the right record out at the right time with the right people, making sure that I'm hitting the different genres and doing all these things that I should be doing as a DJ, as an artist. Well, guess what really happened trying to do all that? I didn't stay true to myself, right? And that hindered me as a producer. I openly, and it's actually a really good place to be because I didn't used to say it out loud as much, but I openly admit that has hindered my progress as a producer. So if you need an example of a reason to finish your tracks and put them out without overthinking, is me, right? You can be super talented, you can be super smart, you can be very knowledgeable on the gear and get no bookings and get no releases and get no traction because you decided that you were going to hold it instead of putting it out, right? So if there was ever a day that you needed somebody to tell you, put that shit out and stop holding it, today is that day. Go ahead.
So, like, my question is, because I'm trying to put out a project right now. Well, not like right now, but soon, just because I want to stop working on it. But that raised the question of any of y'all taking a track that was out and then fixed it, so, you know what I mean? And just, like,
That's already
took
out?
it down. Yeah. I don't use labels, so I can do that whenever I want. But like anybody,
No,
ever,
to me, if it's already, unless you're wanting to play it.
I did a whole ass project this way.
Yeah,
like,
no.
it was out, and I'm like, I learned a bunch of stuff,
Oh, and you went back to it?
and I just redid it. Yeah,
You got new tracks to make, man.
I know that's what I should have told myself, but I was just so attached to that particular project for a myriad of reasons. So yeah,
Okay.
I will never do that again.
Yeah.
And I don't. And that's actually my segue. Don't ever do that.
Let me answer that in a different way. Let me actually show you. Let me show you the proof of what that. Let me show you what that looks like. That habit of going, like, of not being able to leave things done and put them out and leave them alone and move on. So I'm just gonna scroll for a little bit, right? And this isn't ego. This is not me showing off or anything. My point here is to show you, like you said, projects, right? All right. Each one of these playlists that says cycles is a whole project. Each one of these playlists that says 16-bit cream, that's a whole project. These tracks, I've had these for some of those for 15 years or longer, right? Like some of these are really old. Like I made some of these on an analog drum machine and like Pro Tools 3 or like something stupid, like from like really long time ago, right? And I've had them this whole time. I went back in because I decided I wanted to honor myself now that I've learned all these things, right? And I said, all right, I want to go and I want to release that old stuff, but I want to do it in the right context. So I created these 5-track EPs in an attempt to put this stuff out so that I can get past it, right? And what happens is this catalog builds up and it's like a monkey on your back. It's the attachment remains, and that attachment doesn't go anywhere until other people can go listen to it on some public platform. Whatever it is, it doesn't even matter, even if it's Bandcamp, right?
That was part of how I gaslit myself. It wasn't on streaming services when I made that decision. I'm like, this is the Spotify edit. And then it's just like, went way down the rabbit hole.
One of the things I've learned from other, like much more, I mean, you define success. Success has completely changed, as far as what it means to me. But one of the things I've noticed is that people put their records out regardless of how they feel about them, right? Like, that's done. It's good enough is what I'm saying, right? Yes, it could be better. Yes, you could give more time. Yes, you can mix it better. Yes, you can go back and do another session. You could do all that, right? But in order to build up a catalog and in order to build up consistency and momentum, which is the name of the game, you have to release regularly. Now, I'm sitting up here saying that being an example of someone who hasn't taken these steps, and you have heard the talent, right? And I say that respectfully, but if you don't put the music out, you'll never know if the other people feel the same way, right? And so I'm a proponent of, you hit the flow state. You know that level of excitement when you stand up, or I scream sometimes in a weird way, or sometimes I say, oh shit, and the way I say it, Mindy has heard me many times. There's a palpable excitement when I hit that moment, and that's when I know, like, okay, we're about to do something. And when I say that, it means, okay, we're about to do something, and like then something's gonna happen with this track, right? It's not just like we're gonna do something cool and play for our friends. It's I want to slate it to release, right? I want to go put it somewhere. Even if you're not sure where it goes on a project, right? You'll figure it out. These projects came together really nicely, and they became a run of like 5 EPs, right? I didn't make any new music for that. It's just stuff I had, but I finally figured out how to package it in a way that makes sense, right? And so, again, I go back to put it out, don't overwork it, don't overcook it. The don't overcook it part is like, it's really important. And this is the last thing I'm gonna say, and then I know I'm over time, Mindy, sorry. The don't overcook it is important. You ever have a moment where you don't know what else to put on the track? You know, when you feel like, oh, like it's good, like I'm liking it, like I'm really digging it, but it just needs... No, it needs you to stop. In that moment, you need to stop and wrap it up, right? That's truly what it needs. And I figured this out because I kept getting to these points where I'd be like, man, that joint is like this fire, but it just is missing, it just needs, right? That little just needs turns into a month when you didn't get back to it. And now you don't even feel the same way, because you've heard it, if you're like me, 500 times, right? You've heard the track. And now every glaring thing that might potentially be an issue is all up in your face now. So you can't even remember how good it felt when you made the track and when you were in that moment, right? So I say to you, as my parting kind of thing, savor that moment. That's where the magic is. And that's the moment that you want to give to your listeners, right? How can you give them that if you took it away from yourself? Does that make sense, everybody? Savor that moment where you feel really good about it and decide, does this really need more? Am I gonna make this 20% better by tinkering around with this other symbol and reversing it? And then adding compression and maybe a little delay, right? Like, doesn't that sound like it's going down a downhill slope? And that's exactly what happens, is you overcook it, and then you literally produce the feeling out of it. Like, you take away the juice that was originally the idea, right? So, practical tip, trust your initial idea. If it sounds good early on, it likely doesn't need much more, right?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to end on that note. That was a good one. Shit.
Round of applause. Does anyone have any questions
everybody.
for Hector real quick?
About anything at all.
So, how do you deal with your inner critic? You're like, you put something down and like start comparing. Like, how do you talk back to it? Do you like?
It's a great question.
I'll tell them to fuck off. I'm dead serious. How do I deal with my inner critic? So, to answer that question honestly, like without joking, I am absolutely my harshest, worst critic. I cannot express how many times I've been like, yeah, but Mindy, do you hear that part right there? That part right there? No. That thing is doing that thing right there. No. Your friends aren't going to hear it, right? And so your inner critic is based on some expectation of yourself that likely isn't real, one. You don't really know what it sounds like. You're just guessing at this idea of like, oh, wait, but like, did I nail that part? And it's like, okay, when you walk away from it and come back to it, that's typically how I test it. I leave for a while. I put it down, or I just don't listen to it for however long, right? And then when I turn it back on, again, just from experience, like whatever's wrong immediately jumps out. Or, which is lately, I want to say last few years, most often the case, I go, what the fuck is my problem? Like, that's often the question when I leave it alone and come back to it. I go, well, what was wrong with this? Like, so when you're asking yourself, what was wrong with this? Right? It means nothing. It means it should have been done. And you just are being critical of yourself. I can speak to this like really well because I'm just a lot of experience here in this specific department. Just in this one.
You don't say.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Hey, thank you. I really appreciate all your
course.
words tonight. So first question is a little technical. When you talked about mixing your vocal samples and splitting the three, I'm familiar with that technique with
Okay.
using regular vocals. But with that same thing, would you do the same technique with if you're using a vocoder, where it would be like a robotic voice, or compared to just somebody singing or talking?
Oh, that's a good question. So typically the effects like that, it depends on if it comes out stereo, right? With vocal, most vocal are mono. Most vocals are mono, right? Everybody, okay. Yep. So Ableton just makes everything stereo though. But it's not really true. What it's doing is just giving you the same signal to both sides, right? Truly being mono though, there is a difference when you pan, right? And it's a stereo source, but it's a vocal. Let's say that was, but right. There's a difference when you pan in the way that it reacts. If it's truly a mono source, the placement is different and it's wider. You can go further left to right. So I make those tracks mono on purpose, meaning whatever's coming through it, I put a mono plugin on it, right? And now I've got it like kind of how it should be. And then I can separate and stack and, move to left to right. Now, if you do that with a stereo source, it could get muddy because there's delay, which is stereo. There's all these things that are also stereo. And so you end up getting a lot of signal that is similar at the same time, right? Which typically leads to masking or leads to mud. So I like to keep my sources clean in terms of placement and mono or stereo. And then I let the effects do the stuff on the sides often, right? Background vocals, I pan decently hard, but not all the way. I never pan hard left or hard right. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And the general one thing that I had a bunch of questions, and it kind of goes with overall things that I'm pondering right now when I produce. I tend to do things differently, like make a second drop different from the first instead of just like repeating it and sticking to like 5 main elements. Or I'll try to like, use a different synth sound than that. Something similar but different.
Okay.
And two of the feedbacks I've gotten is, oh, it sounds like 2 or 3 different songs at once sometimes. So it almost is an answer. Your first bullet point on the right under don't overcook it. Simplicity is powerful. Listeners connect with more clear, focused ideas over complexity. So I think I try to just, because you want to change up every now and then. So I think I'm trying to change it up too much in that way. So is that enough for you to speak on that a little more?
Yeah, I would be glad to speak on that. I am a fan of complexity.
And is that like a wrong way? Because that's what. Sorry to interrupt.
good.
Is like that breaking the rules in a good way, or is that breaking the rules in a bad way? Because that's like I'm on the fence. With
Making
that.
things
So
complex?
Going with that, yeah.
Is that what you
Yes.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think more often than not, simplicity is preferred, right? But I'm careful with saying that because sometimes the most simple things are annoying and they're really good, right? And it's almost like, you got to be kidding me, man. You put like that's like 4 tracks, and that went somewhere, and it went to like the top 10 on Beatport and did this whole thing, and you know that the person didn't really do much, but there's a reason for that. Complexity can be confusing when you have a buzz and you're on the floor and you're trying to follow the hi-hat that keeps fucking changing every 16 bars, right? So, and I say that to be funny, but I make my changes every 16 to 32 bars, but I phrase them. And so you can make it complex, but your phrasing has to be tight. And by that I mean there's parts in the song where one thing goes away, another thing comes in. It's different, but the content of the notes is similar, right? And so maybe if you want to accentuate that bass line that you're talking about and you want to do a switch at 32 bars, add a mid layer, right? Go up an octave, high pass it, and then use that to get the additional stack, right? To beef it up a little bit. And then
You're changing it with keeping it more in line with the flow, like
Yeah.
the dance floor, and you're moving.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's progressing instead of switching. Whoa, where'd that come from?
right.
Okay.
Hard switching, especially with dance music, especially if it's fast, hard switching can be really good. Like if you go into a drop and you flip it and you leave it with the bass and the kick and like a woo, like that's it. Sometimes that shit goes off, right? But if you switch it to like a completely other patch and a completely other pattern, you're like, it's kind of like the people were with you in that moment. They were like, I'm really digging this. Like, oh shit, what happened? Like, oh man, like, and then they're like, oh no, I want the other thing to come back, right? And like, you can almost see it when it happens, when you're playing your track and you're playing for people, you can almost see it. So what I would say is decide on what the groove is of the track and make sure that you're constantly reaching
into the
back
groove.
to that groove, right? Like you're giving the people that groove that's important because that's why they stay, right? I have had the feedback of that sounds, actually Mindy herself has told me that sounds like 2 different tracks, bro. And indeed they were. There's been times when I had to split them up, just duplicate it, you know? You said you change every drop. I change every drop. None of my drops are the same. It is
I like
very
to be
rare.
different. Sometimes somebody's like, oh, just repeat it. I'm like, that's kind of boring.
Well, I do repeat it.
Can be, but change it a little.
Let me rephrase that. So let's say I do like the intro, the first little build up, and then a drop, right? And then now I've got enough where I could actually just repeat that. I could duplicate that, and now I've got my second drop, right? After I duplicate that, that's when I go in and do some changes, but I don't completely change the structure of the song, right? I can drop a couple things in and out, maybe use a shaker instead of a hat to kind of give it, you know, when the drums are not there or whatever. But be careful to not depart from the groove. Like that's, and be careful not to lose momentum on the breakdown. We both, I think, struggled with that at some point in the past. Not struggled, but I just felt like, man, it's like the song is coming to like a grinding halt, right? And then you get this breakdown, and then you could see the people, and they're doing, I'm gonna do it, fuck it. They're doing this thing. You know when people do this, right? They're waiting for you to do something or for the track to do something, right? So when you see people doing this shit right here and they're looking around, right? You're on a timer now. You best do something, right? And so think about when you're listening to your track, if you're in the car or if you play it for, whatever, look at their reactions and see, like, does it look like they're waiting, right? You'll know. You'll get a feeling. And typically that feeling that says, oh, I should, is mostly right. Right? Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? We need a break? Oh, go ahead.
We'll do one more question.
Do you have any tips for becoming more comfortable with the session view or the super loop? Because I've tried to use it a little bit. I know it's a powerful tool. I just I don't know.
You mean with this side of things here?
Yeah.
So I think let me answer that question with a question.
Okay.
What kind of producer are you? Where do you pull your content from? Or like, do you play a lot? Do you play a lot of instruments? Do you sample?
I normally just make like weird sounds and then like sample them and keep like a little sample bank of stuff to
Cool.
arrange.
No, that's cool. So do you pull them into this view?
I do. I use it as like a sample bank, but I've never really had luck like playing in it and like fleshing out an idea in there.
Really?
And I do think it would be a lot more helpful with creativity rather than just like lining everything up linearly.
Yeah, I prefer to start kind of on this side, but I absolutely have on the other side. I think getting more comfortable with the browsing, right, and setting up folders so that you can, how you said you have these folders with samples that you created, right?
Yeah.
You can reach them from in here. So like I've got this sound library. Here's some vinyl samples, right? This shit's gonna be empty probably. But anyway, I can get to all the stuff from right in here, and then I can just drag it onto a track and start playing it.
Okay.
You haven't used it in that way? And
no,
there's
not
no
really.
judgment
Well,
or
so,
nothing.
How do you sort of like keep your clips like in a certain amount of time? Do you sort of like flesh those out into 8-bar clips or?
Totally.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me not mess up really quick. Hold on. Let's just go through it really quick. So I'm gonna add a couple of audio tracks here, right? And I just found this. I say that's fine. Yep, that's cool. So I can double click it, and then I get this view here, right?
Yep.
And so this controls the clip, right? Meaning this, obviously what I just put on there, right? And so if I want this to be just 2 bars, I can just kind of make it 2 bars. Or I can go somewhere over here and say, I want this length to be 2 bars, right? You have to have looped it though. And so, let me solo this really quick. Man, which one was it? I think it was this one, right? The screen is tiny. So you can just continue. Like, I can go over here and do this and put that over there, right? And then play that one and make that 4 bars if I want, right? And then so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but if you're wondering, hey, well, how long does it go? It goes the length of the longest loop,
Okay.
right? So everything else will loop on its own time, right? And everything will repeat at least once. Well, let me rephrase this. If I have a 16-bar loop, that's just gonna go for 16 bars and then loop around, right? Anything else that's shorter is gonna keep repeating along with it at that length, right? So you just have to set up your loop here in this clip view the right way, and then it'll just keep going forever.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why this is so powerful for live. That's why it's literally go live, right? Because you could throw a bunch of stuff in here. The program stays stable during your performance. You can choose what parts you want to play, and you can just keep it going for forever. And so I could do, let's say, I could do a scene for every track and have 10 scenes in the one session, right? I can do my whole performance that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, last but not least, do you have anything you want to plug? Plug.
Back of the house here tomorrow. I'm excited to come back.
Yeah.
Again, spend my evening, John.
Thanks, Timber Room. Thanks, Sean. Oh, hey, John.
I will probably play the track from tonight. I think I'm probably going to master it tonight. Okay, shameless plugs. I am taking engineering clients, and learning clients too. So I do one-on-one lessons. I do audio engineering, mixing, and mastering for people too. And I'm not working right now, which is, I gotta say, it's pretty glorious. And I say that just with the love of everybody, with love for everybody who's working. I have time to work on my art, and it really is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And so if you need help with a mix, if you need feedback, if you are looking for somebody to mix your track because you feel like you hate it, feel free to contact me. I've got some cards up here if you guys need them. I'll put them up here. Or if you just need a lesson, or if you want to go over what a super loop is like and you want to schedule an hour, I'm open to all that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks
All
for having
right,
me, guys.
round of applause for Hector. Well, thank you. We're going to take a quick bio break, get a drink. Don't forget to tip your bartender. And Dave, if you'll get us some ambiance. And then we'll do track feedback.